Before the institutionalization of religion, the divine was accessed through the everyday experience. Lunar cycles, solar cycles, the menstrual cycle that women have. There is an attunement with everything that goes on. We are part of nature. We are not living in nature. In order to operate within the systems, right, within the construct of society, economic systems, I had to ascribe values and beliefs to whatever those systems were, right? If you're going to operate in a capitalist framework, then in order to succeed, you must abide by and adhere to the respective ideology. If it means that you have to destroy an entire ecosystem by taking down rainforests in Brazil, that's part of the deal. You know, you're taught to memorize beliefs, not question them. So you take this performative, mechanized identity, and then you live your life based on that because you have to. You're driven by your ego. It's what has to happen in order for you to again, survive and live in this paradigm. I talk about the illusion of separation, which exists globally, right? Where we believe that we are separate from everything around us, where we don't believe we're connected to nature. What you're learning is that we are physical objects living in this jungle, in the survival of the fittest jungle. But again, to say that we are this wave without an ocean is completely illogical. And how do you define a wave if you're not incorporating the ocean in your definition of it? But this is how we construct our lives. This is how we live our lives. We live our lives as if we are this singular wave, not attached to source, not attached to anything divine or sacred. When you live your life in that schism, when you adopt these ideologies, it impacts you on a very deep mental, spiritual level.
All right, Aaron, I'm really excited to get into this conversation with you. My throat is a little bit off.
Okay.
So it's a bit of a struggle. My apologies if I'm coughing all the time in between, but I will mute myself if I am so inclined. If I feel like I'm choking.
Okay. I might add like some authenticity to it. You might not want to cancel out the sound.
If I know like it's gonna be a big one, then yeah. Usually I will just like lean back and just do my thing, but yeah, if it's a big one that I feel like my throat has been off for the past week, so maybe It's just a lot of the talking. Maybe I need to give myself some throat care. All right, let's get into it. So you talk a lot about the systems in society, and you also talk about spiritual awakening and a lot of realizations that happen in between that. You said you spent a long time on Wall Street. So you have like a blend of like really concrete, grounded society stuff. And then you have also this spiritual realization happening, right? So first, what I'd like to get into to provide some context into where you're coming from, I'd love to know, do you have any type of spiritual or religious upbringing? Like, what was that like for you? Like, give me a little bit of a gist of what your upbringing was like and kind of like how you got into the work that you've been doing for such a long time.
Yeah, so I was raised, I guess, in a quasi-religious upbringing. My father was an observant Jew, and I don't know if you're familiar with the religion, but most of like the prayers and like high holiday celebrations are conducted in Hebrew, right? Yeah. And I kind of like noticed from a young age that like people would just kind of like go to temple and congregate and recite prayers for hours, having absolutely no idea what they were singing. They weren't like reading the translations, right? And so from a very young age, I was kind of like suspect, if that makes sense, of the whole structure. I was kind of like, okay, I get it, and I believe in like a higher, power, but like this certainly is a strange way of tapping into that, and um, it didn't really seem like a real connection anyway. So even if like you agreed, or even if like you could decipher what was being um, said in the prayers, or you like read the translations, even then you're still kind of in many ways like disconnected from anything really spiritual, right? So from a very very young age, I was kind of like suspect, or I was kind of wanting, if you will, right?
Mm,
And um, really all my life I've had a very acute interest and thirst for information and knowledge. I can't really explain it more than that. At university, when all of my friends were studying, accounting and finance, I was studying philosophy and economic theory,
mm,
because I just always had like this, I don't know, deeper drive or deeper interest in meaning for things. I want to understand why things were set up the way they were. I want to understand what the foundation, the bedrock was for um, you know, morals, values. I mean, the whole thing, really. So
mhm,
my kind of journey, I would say, formally probably started at the university, at the time around the university, where again I was doing a lot of just kind of research through my coursework and trying to understand things better. I came to kind of a so I've been kind of going along this path for over 2 decades, really.
mm,
And again, to your point, I've had this real kind of like practical experience with working on Wall Street. I've also um, founded some companies, and I've been kind of in the mix, right? So, which I think lends a nice perspective, obviously a practical perspective. About a couple of years ago, I kind of like reached a breaking point
mm,
with myself, where again, well, to back up, kind of when I went into the industry, when I started working on Wall Street, I kind of consciously knew at the time that I had to literally like push off an entire side of my being. It's the only way that I could really like conceptualize what I was doing. But I
mm,
knew that in order to kind of like pursue this life, I had to block out a part of myself. Um, what part of myself that was, I wasn't really necessarily able to verbalize at the time.
yeah.
Now I kind of have been able to, but what kind of happened and what accumulated over all the years is I kind of like kept having to push back, and it created, I think, in many ways, kind of like mini trauma. Year after year, I was losing, close relationships. I was not valuing friendship. I was not, again, kind of my entire ethical, call it moral, whatever you want to call it, infrastructure was just completely eroded. And
Yeah.
I had to keep up with performance. I had to always be focusing on money myopically, always be kind of like glued to my desk. And I was just kind of like, I have two young children. I was kind of like, what the heck am I doing?
Mm,
Let's take a step back and reassess what's going on here. And kind of at the time, given again all the kind of work that I've done and my kind of high level understanding, and even the work that I did on a more iterative basis, and then after really formalizing this effort, um, I started expressing these things, I think, in more of kind of like this context, if that makes sense. If that gives you, hopefully, that gives you a decent background.
yeah. First, what you were just saying about, about your religion, I think like a lot of religions have that issue. Like whether you go to a church, a synagogue, a mosque, reading the text, not really connecting with what the text is saying. You know what I mean? And you're congregating, you're, you know, talking to your friends, you're just there sitting absorbing information that's been given to you. You kind of like leave the interpretation of what is written to the priest or the pastor, or whoever it may be, the imam. So I I find that it happens a lot in religious institutions. And then you kind of go home and go about your regular life, and nothing much changes, and you're still disconnected, and you're still unhappy, and you're still stuck in a lot of the cycles that you're stuck in every single day. And not much is different about you or your life or your understanding about life or your understanding about yourself and your purpose and all those things. So I found it like really amusing when you said that, because I've observed that literally everywhere. It's everywhere. It is
Right.
so funny.
And look, and kind of a big part of my effort again is to really go back to the origin stories of
Yeah.
every religion, of and looking, and in doing so, what you find, and I'm sure that you're aware of this, but you find like a real, before the texts were completely altered, right? With Christianity, this took place um, at the Council of Nicaea, when the Roman Empire decided to take over the religion. There were
Yeah.
massive changes made to the text. There were additions, there were subtractions. I mean, you
Yeah.
name it. Um, this happened with Judaism during the Babylonian exile, which was the major kind of change to the text, where um, kind of like the priestly um, status was incorporated, and there was some real kind of ardent um, focusing on like dogmatic, legal, kind of rigid doctrine.
Hmm.
So anyway, it took place within Islam. Prophet, Muhammad married a woman, and the feminine kind of component was part of the story for a long time, and then there was kind of like this patriarchal institutionalization. So this institutionalization took place across all, certainly
Yeah.
Abrahamic religions, but even in the Eastern philosophies, right? And um, this was kind of, when I started learning this stuff, it was kind of like a real revelation for me. And
Mm.
it kind of, only further quenched my thirst, because I wanted to understand why that happened, right? Why are rabbis the intermediaries? Why are priests,
Yeah.
why are male rabbis the intermediary? Why are male priests the ones who intermediate between the individual and the divine, right? So
Yeah.
again, my pursuit has been in many ways to understand the systemic changes that took place that compartmentalized spirituality or the sacred or the divine in such a way, right? So I don't know if you want me to keep going, but I can. But I guess very quickly, the main takeaway you see is a very widespread knowing of the divine, the sacred, the spiritual in everyday life, right?
Yeah.
Before the institutionalization of religion, the divine was accessed through the everyday experience.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that was relegated to holidays or to going to a temple or a church. It was something that could be accessed and experienced every day. You could see it, you could recognize it. Everything from lunar cycles, solar cycles, the the menstrual cycle that women have, there is an alignment, there is an attunement with everything that goes on. We are part of nature. We are not living in nature, right? There is a symbiosis. There is an ecosystem that transcends many planes, right? And what I was able to kind of deduce, I think, is what transpired is, in order to institutionalize religion, you have to remove those things that cannot be dogmatic and that cannot
Yeah.
be enforced and rigid. And there was this real understanding of the masculine versus the female essences, forces, right? The
Yeah.
feminine was sort of the energy of like reciprocity and regeneration and um, deeper meaning and emotion, and the male was kind of like think of it like kind of like the force that allows um, the deeper meaning to transcend into this realm, like um, logic for the man versus mystical understanding or deeper meaning for the, and you see this kind of all over the place. You even see it in scripture where with the Holy Trinity is really, in truth, it's an alchemy where they talk about, where it's really about, the masculine thought and the feminine emotion coming
Yeah.
together and then creating in the world. So there was a suppression of this feminine energy, right? And it was probably the greatest spiritual shift that mankind or humankind has experienced, and it's created what we now have as religions. It was an overt removal of part of this spirituality or this divine connection that we have and can experience, every single day. I've got a lot more to say on that, but I'll stop there.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I love everything you just said. Um, you know, going back to, we're going to get into this some more, but first, going back to what you were saying about when you were working on Wall Street, when you were so kind of like disconnected from yourself and disconnected from your life, right? When did you begin, at what point did you begin to kind of deconstruct your own identity and your kind of like place in the world and what your place in the world truly means? Because you were like, as you said, like you were like so focused on work, you were at the desk, you kind of didn't at a time you weren't having this wholesome experience where there was this harmonizing between who you are as an individual versus like the relationships around you, like making space for that, the relationships around you, your relationship to life, your relationship to yourself. Because, listening to you, what I heard was you were pretty much cut off from who you truly were. And so because of that, it hindered your ability to connect with others. Right. So I'd love to know, how did you begin to deconstruct your own identity and, like what that meant for you?
Yeah. So I would say that again, I was kind of acutely aware again of who I was or who I am
Mm,
um, when I embarked on, kind of my professional endeavors. But I also knew that in order to operate within the systems, right, within the construct of society, economic systems, that I had to ascribe values and beliefs to whatever those systems were.
yeah.
It's just part of the deal, right? If you're going to operate in a capitalist framework, then in order to succeed, you must abide by and adhere to the respective ideology, which is kind of maybe not known to people, but the idea of like the end justifies the means, the
Yeah.
the idea that the kind of like shareholder maximization ideology, where the bottom line, all that matters is that the shareholder is maximized, right? Like
Yeah.
literally, that's the company's moral obligation, right? So
Yeah.
if it means that you have to, maybe it's illegal, but you have to destroy an entire um, ecosystem by taking down rainforests in Brazil, that's part of the deal. Like that's just what it is. So what people don't realize is that that ideology bleeds into the individual who is performing or living under that construct, just the
Hmm.
way it is, right? You may not recognize it, you may not be self-aware, but it's what you're doing, right? You're going, and it goes beyond morals, right? It goes into like your daily life where you are waking up at an early hour, you're spending your entire daylight hours at work for 5 out of the 7 days of your week, and then you're relegating 2 days to the weekend, which effectively allow you to like squeeze everything in and recharge, right?
Yeah.
So you are, and you might have to do it because that's what the system requires. That's what to survive or to thrive past whatever benchmark you're using. But that right there, I'm not no judgment, but that right there tells you, right, where you are valuing your time and how you value your existence. Quite frankly, you
Yeah.
must accumulate money, and you must live your life according to kind of the mental framework of just constant accumulation, which is the same mental framework as what major corporations do. It's just it's constant, endless growth, right? Probably about 2 years ago, I kind of maybe had a far deeper introspection into my identity and the kind of performative identity that I was or character that I was playing, right, in my everyday life. Because everybody plays a character, whether they want to recognize it or not, right?
Oh yeah.
It's consciously or consciously, right? Like,
Yeah.
and what happens is when you grow up and you live in this framework, in this ideology, right? Again, whether you're conscious of it or not, you must contort yourself. And in doing so, what happens is, and this obviously gets more intense as you're actually performing in the economy, but it also happens on a kind of lower less grander scale, even with education and indoctrination, where your identity is you're learning as a child that there's this kind of like pass fail or A through F grading system,
Yeah.
right? It's regimented. You're taught to memorize beliefs, not question them, right?
True.
So your identity is based on performance.
Yeah.
You pass or you fail. This doesn't get lost, right? So as you go through the system, and then again, your survival is now based on performance, right? So you take this performative, almost like mechanized identity, and then you live your life based on that because you have to. You're driven by your ego. You're not allowed to, the spiritual or the sacred or divine it has to be pushed aside. And although you may be a believer in the back of your mind, it's what has to happen in order for you to, really do what you have to do to, again, survive and live in this paradigm. I started doing real introspection, again, probably about 2 years ago, where I was able to dig much deeper into understanding not just myself, but how a lot of this stuff can impact and has an impact on, any individual, no matter their social status, no matter their, financial situation. It impacts everybody, and it goes unnoticed and it's unknown, and it accounts for me, it accounted for a lot of what I would call, trauma and disconnection. And that, I believe, is the same experience that people are experiencing just by virtue of being thrown out of whack with our natural ebb and flow that we all have inside of us. This is not, again, mystical. This is all part of our biology, our our neurobiology. I mean, it's all kind of there. So I hope that answers it. I know that wasn't an efficient response, but I hope that gives you an idea of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. As you were saying, to your point, a lot of our identity, and I think it takes a long time for a lot of us to recognize that a lot of our identity is tied up into things that has nothing to do with us, really, right? There is it's based on achievement. As you said, there is always a performance, right? You show up, you perform, you pass, you fail, you rise, you fall, all of these things. So, coming from that perspective, what does it look like now when you begin to turn the tide on that? Because how have you been able to, upon recognizing this, or I guess having been a seeker for such a long time, I'm assuming you've had some level of recognizing, like you've recognized this for some time, but you had to perform regardless, as you said. So I'd love to know now, like, how did you begin to kind of turn the tide on that? How can anyone even begin to undo that? Because as you said, the society that we live in requires us to be a certain way, requires us to put some aspects of ourselves to the side, as you did when you were performing in your role. When you said If the shareholders requires cutting down trees and destroying forests, then that's required, but that also affects the person whether they realize it or not on a very deep level, right? Because you look at the forest as something that is completely separate from you, that has nothing to do with you, and this is a forest over there in another country. It's not affecting your everyday life, but it does affect you internally, whether you recognize that or not. So I'd love for you to speak to that.
Yeah, sure. So, I think the Amazonian rainforest destruction, I think that speaks a lot to, again, kind of like what a corporation um, is required to do, right? Now, like a human being, for example, is required to, let's say they're running a business, and they have investors, and they need their profit margin to increase in order to keep up with the expected amount of money they're supposed to make, right? So a business is constantly trying to grow. It's infinite growth. Well, what do you have to do as a person to accommodate that infinite growth, or even just maintain that growth? Like what margin are you making on your products? Are you a company that is exploiting cheap labor in Bangladesh to
Yeah.
make t-shirts, right? Like that impacts the individual. When your hands or when your actual self touches that, right? Exploitation, taking advantage of people, right? It happens with the everyday worker. What if somebody, let's say somebody's buying from wholesale, they're buying something for $2, and everybody else is getting it for $3, but they're still looking to make 200% on their markup. I mean, it's little stuff like that, right? That impacts the individual. They don't realize it, but it becomes part of their compass, their moral compass. It's in many ways their moral compass is overridden by this new
Yeah.
compass, right? Which they're required to do. And I think that it impacts them spiritually without them knowing it.
Mm-hmm.
And the identity question is a kind of very, very broad question, and I'll start kind of answering it by saying that we really operate under a lot of illusions. Okay,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
a major illusion that I talk about. I have an upcoming book, probably will be getting published in the next couple of months now. I'm very excited about, but I talk about the illusion of separation, which exists globally, right? Where we believe that we are separate from everything around us, right? Where we don't believe we're connected to nature, we're not connected to other people, we're not connected to ecosystems. This is a complete illusion.
Yeah.
Why do I say that? Well, we all exist because of these ecosystems. We breathe in
Exactly.
air from vegetation. We expel carbon dioxide that they breathe. Um, we have, the microbes in our body come from the outside world. We are all part of the same nature. We are not living in nature. With human beings, we have mirror neurons that are, we are in many ways like structured and programmed to receive and, operate relationally. We see somebody cry. We cry. We wince when somebody's getting hurt. Right? So we are deeply connected with other people. Now,
Yeah.
when you are raised in the paradigm, in the scientific materialist paradigm that we've all been raised in, everybody knows about guys like Rene Descartes or Isaac Newton. All
Yeah.
of these guys pushed this scientific materialism, and I learned it in school as well, in grade school, and in high school, right? Where everything is material,
Yeah.
and like the spirit or consciousness is just kind of like a weird, quirky byproduct, right?
Yeah.
But in truth, what you're learning is that we are physical objects living in this jungle, in the survival of the fittest jungle. Which, by the way, survival of the fittest lie is another great story. But in no way are species ascending or surviving by cutting themselves off and destroying other species. It's well
Yeah.
documented that it is the symbiotic ecosystem and the dependency upon other species that propel species upward in an evolutionary capacity. So
Yeah.
that aside, right? So when you believe that through your whole life, when you're told that you have to perform to excel in society, that you have industry being set up to exploit workers and to maximize profitability for corporations, when you have been indoctrinated to believe that you are just this material object by way of your formal educational schooling, when your religions are demanding that you access the spirituality and God through an external third party, that you don't have the ability to access it within yourself. Well, what is it telling you, right? What identity are you garnering from that? Now, most people don't think about it to the in-depth level that I do. People might think that I'm, being, just over curious and this is all irrelevant. But in truth, to think that it's not impacting you, in my mind, is, and I think many like-minded thinkers, is to be completely unconscious. I mean, to think that you have just miraculously established this way to live life that coincides with everybody else because it's just inherent to your being. This is the biggest like level of confusion, because we aren't, and this is not how it works, right? We are learning. We are impacted by all of these many things, all of our many experiences, right? And this really transcends many planes, as do all of these discussions. But quite simply, where you're identifying again with your worth and your material possessions and your success and your title and your all these things. These again are not who you are. Even further, your thoughts and your emotions are not who you are. You're experiencing them, but to define yourself in this sort of like rigid capacity that like your thoughts are who you are. Well, what if one day you're really mad at somebody and then the next day you're really happy with them? These are fluid experiences, right? We experience them, but they are not us. So the question is, who are we, right? If we aren't these things? And in kind of my, really drilling down endeavor, it's really hard to not think of your identity or your existence as kind of like, I call it like you're a wave in the ocean, right? You are, because we're all connected, right? So we are kind of like this unique being experiencing itself in this form, and like Aaron and Kertia's unique form, right? But again, to say that we are this wave without an ocean is completely illogical. I mean, it makes no sense. How do you define a wave if you're not incorporating the ocean in your definition of it? It's just, and this is how we construct our lives. This is how we live our lives. We live our lives as if we are this singular wave, not attached to source, not attached to anything divine or sacred. And guess what? When you live your life in that schism, when you adopt these ideologies, it impacts you on a very deep mental, spiritual level. And this is really kind of like a big part of what I'm looking to reveal to people. And in doing so, I believe that people, if they're empowered with this kind of information and they're able to kind of like get more curious and dig a little deeper, then these people too will realize that they are not, forced to identify with these vapid things that will never make you happy. Forget about even identity. They won't make you happy. They're not who you are. So that's kind of my effort. And I saw a big void kind of in that practice with kind of like spirituality, in that a lot of people were looking to kind of like transcend a plane and access or think of spirituality in like a different realm. But in truth, spirituality exists in our everyday lives. We've just been taught that it doesn't by our own religions, whether we want to look at it that way or not. We can't make the connection. But we don't have to go to church to access the divine. We don't have to go to an institution. Just not reality. So, and I don't mean to be like rude or like to be, I'm not trying to be like disrespectful, but to live your life identifying who you are the way that you are in this performative, object-based, disconnected from spirit or divine identity is to be delusional. You are
Mm-hmm.
living a fragmented, delusional life, and it creates a deluded reality for you, right? So all of these people, which is really remarkable when you think about it, because all of these people who are spiritual and are trying to incorporate spirituality into their lives, like they're looked upon as being like strange. Why?
Yeah.
Because society has been indoctrinated to look at life the complete opposite way. And it's by virtue of our social systems and how we internalize the requirements both consciously and unconsciously.
Mm-hmm.
This is just the fact. So again, I found a disconnect between the practical and the spiritual. So I really feel like if we can make that connection if I can make that connection for people, it will have a positive impact in awakening and in realization. I just gobbled up so much time. I'm sorry, but I wanted to
No, I
kind of give
love
you,
it. I
I
love
wanted to give
it.
you kind of like, where this comes from and why. And I know personally, and it's also kind of like, wow, why do you care? Why are you doing this? Well, I experienced so much kind of like pain and trauma living this schism and knowing what other people are going through. Not and in many ways, kind of like being burdened in the survivalist mentality, it blocks you off from any kind of like higher level of consciousness. So you're always surviving. Your ego is controlling you. You operate out of habit and reaction. No introspection, right? Um, and I see the world, and it's although people are awakening, we're still in a really dark place. And I
Mm.
feel like anything that I can do to kind of like empower people to restructure identity and to realize that they are not chained by these systems, that they are bigger than these systems, that they are bigger than their identity. I view that as kind of like a necessary thing to do.
Yeah. And
You've been doing great, by the way.
let me get my water.
Are you laughing at my response? Or are you laughing at your cough?
I'm laughing at it all.
Okay. Why do you not agree with me? You think what's so funny?
I agree with everything you just said.
Okay,
It is
good.
so true. Listen, human beings are possibly the most delusional creatures on this planet.
Well, it's easily manipulated. That's for sure.
Oh, yes. And as you said, it all goes back to, as you were saying, believing that we are the wave, not recognizing our connectedness to the whole, to the entirety of everything, to each other, to nature, to source. And even, religious people may think, well, you go to church or you go to synagogue or you go to a mosque or whatever, and you think that that is your connection to source. But as you said, like, your connection to source has nothing to do with a building. It has nothing to do with anyone else. It has nothing to do with this third party that you need to go through. It's in you. It's already within you. You are already experiencing your connection to source every single day in the very air that you breathe, right? So we have kind of like lost that concept entirely. And because of that, that is why we're so, of course, easily manipulated, because we have lost touch of all of that, our interconnectedness to everything that is here. But going back to your point, as where we are today in the world as a society, as a collective, I know, like, it looks like the world is burning, like everything is upside down, but I do see more of these conversations happening. So I don't think we're a lost cause, but I want you not, I mean, like, I want to know, like, from your perception, right? what do you think we can do? And of course, it starts with the individual first, of course. But how do we deconstruct this society to create something that is truly focused on people first, to truly focus on, like what is in our greatest good? You know, do you think that's even possible? Or will it take some type of catastrophe for us to begin to redirect ourselves?
I think that our reformation, if you will, is far easier done than perceived or than thought probably about by people. And I think that we need to, I think in order to frame the conversation correctly, or in order to even look at this idea of like a revolution, for example, right? A reformation, a revolution. We always default to changing the external in order
Yeah.
to change the internal, right?
Yeah.
This is the fundamental flaw. So
Yeah.
look at any revolution in the past. Look at the look at the Russian Revolution, Chinese Revolution, in many ways even the American Revolution, or the French Revolution for that matter. All of these systems were changed and overthrown through an external ideology, through a new mechanism of governance. Guess what? There was no thought given to the internal soul of the society. You know,
Yeah.
so right there, this is the problem. So we're always like, oh, this candidate is going to change everything. And what are they going to change? They are beholden to an economic system. Capital right now rules everything. It's
Yeah.
just the way it is. Politicians are corrupt. Corporations have to perform, otherwise they'll go out of business.
Yeah.
People are starving to survive, right? So everything answers to capital. Period. End of story. If you have capital as your God, if you have capital as your governing body, it is by definition soulless in this form, right? We need to look inward. The revolution will not be televised. You know why? Because it happens with every individual on an individual basis. And
Yeah.
what does that look like? Well, it looks like you don't fight the system or the corruption system on its own terms. You can't approach it that way. You're not going to win that way. You don't
Yeah.
have enough power or clout, or so you have to go about it by having an individual change, and through that transformation that individual will experience. And it doesn't have to be this like transcendental, moving to Tibet level. It happens
Mm-hmm.
on a day-to-day basis. It's about reincorporating what's been removed from you or what you've removed from yourself as part
Yeah.
of your daily life, because your spirituality, your sacred connection, your divine connection has never been removed from you. It's been forgotten, or it's
Yeah.
been kind of like you've been so distracted that you don't have the ability to focus on it. So it's my belief that by incorporating spiritual, sacred type practices into your daily life and reframing your thinking around identity and how you approach the world on a day-to-day basis, this is how things change.
Yeah.
And it's through truth and knowledge, because people don't have a true understanding of things. This misinformation, disinformation, forget about like on a spiritual religious level. I mean, that was like the biggest hijacking of spirituality, by institutions, centuries ago. We have
Yeah.
to kind of claw back from that. But, on a day-to-day basis, whether it's, why isn't it normal for us to meditate for 15 minutes every morning? Why isn't it normal for us to give ourselves things like, affirmations, to consciously adjust our reality as we face the day? Why
Yeah.
isn't that important? Well, because it's thought of as like crazy talk. It's thought of as not relevant, or so it's these small steps by I call it like kind of like a disintegration and then a remembering, where
Mm-hmm.
we don't allow these systems in our daily, professional life or work control all of our consciousness, where we let back in, right? our spiritual consciousness into the equation.
Yeah.
That's how things change. That's how systems change. And because all of these systems are embodiments of our consciousness, whether we want to recognize it or not.
Yeah.
They really are. People want to place blame and, these guys are manipulating the world. These guys are, it's a reciprocity. It's a give and take.
Yes.
If you want to be the victim, you can, but guess what? You have the ability to create. You have the ability to change. And so too, do we as a society have the ability to change the nature of these systems, to change the consciousness behind these systems. That's the truth. We created it. We can change it.
Yeah, I love that you pointed that out, because it's so easy to look at what's happening and think that it's completely external. Like, it's the corrupt guys, it's the bad guys, and they did this and they did that, and they're making all the wrong choices. But everything that we see in the world today is possible because we participated in it, right? We co-created everything together. The wars, the starvation, everything that anyone can look down and say, oh, this is a bad thing, and these are the people who are responsible for it. Yes, we know that there are direct players in it, but we indirectly also have a hand in it. We help to co-create these things by the things that we agree to, by forgetting, our core, who we are, coming back to our identity, our spirituality, by forgetting how interconnected we are. And in so doing, then we easily get manipulated and distracted and fearful, and then making choices based on the fears that we have from the things that we have, I guess, ingested from society. And so everything that comes out from that, this is why the world looks the way it looks. And so, like, to your point, that is exactly it. We created everything as it is. So who is to be blamed, really?
And
right?
like, and we can exactly. And there's definitely people who are perpetrating and who are corrupt and who are looking to take advantage of this kind of like schism, right? There are most people, however, who are power players or have a lot of money. I don't even think they're aware of like the metaphysical minutia going on. I really don't think. I think maybe I'm sure there are people in the know who are familiar with kind of this, but I would say on a majority basis, that's just not the case, right?
Yeah.
But what I will say is that I'm trying to think how best to kind of phrase this, but what I will say is that it's really easy to connect kind of what's going on when you look at ideas like balance and reciprocity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like right there. The universe operates with complete, what is the complete efficiency in the most direct manner possible, something to that effect, right? Like the hexagonal shapes of honeycombs are for a reason. It's maximum efficiency. Oh no, it's least amount of effort, maximum efficiency. That's the program of the universe. It's why a bubble forms the way it does. It's why honeycombs are shaped the way they are. It's when light travels, that's the path it takes, right? We too should be operating along that kind of same program. But we've kind of like put this like override program on where balance isn't part of the equation. Real efficiency isn't part of the equation. We are sacrificing and we are doing, that's not the way the universe works. We have no balance. Reciprocity is not part of the discussion. Extraction and optimization is what we look at, right?
Yeah.
So right there on those three basic levels, you can kind of start to understand where we're lacking. And I think any conscious human being would recognize that they are imbalanced and that they're not always looking to give and take. They're mostly looking to take.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's just like very basic stuff. You can start piercing the veil and understanding where that kind of disconnection in ideology or even just conscious awareness has taken place and has really shown itself in everyday behavior.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's really simple to make the connection. It's about seeing it and
Yeah.
understanding why it's the way it is.
Yeah. And just, going back to what you were speaking about at the beginning about suppressing the feminine energy, when it comes to religion and a lot of our belief system, actually, because, like it all starts from the same foundation, like being interconnected with everything else, operating from a space, from your heart space, from love, and all of these things. And like we can see how everything gets distorted after time. Even the Eastern religions, right? They also have their own distortions. So I'd love for you to kind of speak to that some more as well, and how that kind of plays a role into what we see today. Because I mean, I know this is really broad because this can go in every direction possible.
That means it's a good question.
Literally, it can go in every direction possible, and we'd be sitting here all day talking about just this alone. But just, like from off top of your head, what you can gather right now, how the suppression and the depletion of the feminine, of the divine feminine, how that plays a role into the separation that we see today, into the distortion that we see today, into the disconnection that we see today.
Right. Well, look, I think that um, first, people have to understand how impacted they are by their belief systems and their ideology, whether it's kind of in their face or not. Right. So I think that's kind of like the first step people have to make. And people think, I think today people think that like they are fully autonomous and they're making all the decisions and nothing has impacted them. Their consciousness is all theirs and nothing else around them has impacted them. And they're
Yeah.
able to discern whether or not something's impacting them. If you talk to somebody and have an interaction, it's impacting you. You are now changed because of that interaction. Whether they said hello or goodbye or had a 2-hour discourse, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You're impacted and you're changed. People, I don't think, can make the connection on a deeper level or on a deep level how these changes manifest in their being or in their consciousness, right? I can certainly go into where the institutionalization kind of transpired if you'd like, but basically when you go back to um, the reason for the institutionalization, right? You had basically you had people who were living on this planet, and there were like forces that were outside of their control. Whether it was natural disasters or famine or competing, I don't know, enemy, whatever it was, people trying to kill, whatever it was. You had things that were out of your control, and especially with respect to like the divine or to the sacred, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when kind of the initial institutionalization took place, it was kind of on the back of that, where people were, I think, trying to wrap their hands around the idea of God or the source or, whatever, however you want to kind of, or however they digested it, right?
Yeah.
And basically, people had kind of like direct communion with the divine through like moon cycles or dreams and rituals, right? These kind of became formalized into institutional beliefs,
Yeah.
right? So you had, as societies grew more complex, spiritual authority moved from like the collective, everybody, the kind of like the everybody can experience it, to the few. It was kind of like warded off. You can only access it again through this third party, and kind of like what were they really cutting off? What was, because it's one thing to discuss like, oh, the sacred feminine, but what exactly were they doing, right? And when you look at, in truth, what they were doing is they knew that in order for them to take control or power and structure society the way that they wanted to, that they would have to usurp the natural order of the universe, the natural order of earth, the natural order of the human being. because anybody who is in tune spiritually with, I mean, or just in tune with himself, knew that this rigid institutionalization was in direct opposition to everything that they were taught about the sacred or divine or spiritual. This is why we had the Inquisition. This is why we had, the Holy Wars, why we had, just the Dark Ages, all these examples of the church mass murdering people because they wouldn't adhere to their new institutionalized religion.
Yeah.
But what they were suppressing wasn't just the idea of the feminine and her. They were suppressing this deep connection that we have to the earth, to the universal order, to the pattern of things. This is what they were severing. And they not only severed the sacred feminine, but they overextended the masculine. Yeah. So it wasn't enough to just sever off the emotional, intuitive, tied to cycles and rhythms and vibration part of yourself. Then they had to overextend the masculine. The masculine, in truth, is supposed to be this kind of like protective entity, this logic through which action is directed, right? This kind of a framework, the mountain versus the lake or the river, like that kind, the mountain being the masculine in a metaphorical sense, the feminine being like the river. So kind of stuff like that as a kind of a framework. And what happened was, instead of the masculine simply kind of keeping things in order and keeping a balance in order, it became it was perverted, distorted, inverted, whatever you want to call it. And now it's the only governor of kind of action and even like morality, right? Where when you have this kind of like logic-based, materialist-based, objectified identity, where kind of like you're entirely focused, not just consciously, but the output of your actions are looking to optimize, maximize, survive, bring in the most amount of money possible, measuring yourself to other people, identifying with brands and the goods that you have, right? This is what that schism creates. It creates a misidentification. And this is again, a crucial fact that people don't kind of make the connection to. It wasn't just about that severing from a spiritual sense. That spirituality manifests itself in real ways, in the simple balance of your life, right? Like we were kind of talking about before, the rhythms of your life, sleeping and waking up, working 20 hours a day for 2 weeks straight is not natural. It's going to impact you, right? Yeah. Being told that, I mean, there's just so many ways that you're impacted by it, right? So this is how that separation manifests itself. And you're right, it transcends in some way, shape, or form. It transcended all of these belief systems, Eastern philosophies included, where the man was put above the female because that is how people were able to institutionalize and maintain power and control. The second you bring back in the considerations under this feminine divine energy, these power structures crumble because you can't have both. The end doesn't justify the means with consideration. We can't extract forever with consideration. We can't grow infinitely with consideration. It doesn't work. These have to be, side note, these have to be reintegrated into the way we pursue our lives, our economic systems, our businesses. Because if we don't, we are only going to keep this perpetual cycle of, more growth, more into an insatiable appetite. No one's ever going to be satisfied living like this. And one more thing quickly, if you look at like AI, artificial intelligence, I mean, what is the better kind of like example of this mentality, this consciousness? People think that AI is the evolution of humanity, of human consciousness. It is the most blatant example of our misunderstanding of human consciousness.
Yeah.
If we believe that our human consciousness was solely logic, this masculine energy, without any connection to the divine or the sacred, sacred, then yes, this is what AI is. But guess what? We don't even understand our own consciousness, our own intelligence. And we are going to decide that this is the destined evolution of humanity. It is not. It is a destined evolution of a way of constructing human consciousness. It is not. It is in direct opposition. And I don't want to get like prophetic here or talk about prophecy, but I mean, if you want to talk about an idea of an antichrist, I don't know what a better idea of an antichrist is than a fully sentient artificial intelligence. It is the embodiment of everything that this society values and everything that the society does not value and doesn't recognize to be even real.
Yeah.
I'll stop there, but sorry.
I love it. Oh my goodness. I'm enjoying this, you know.
I am too.
I'm kind of just sitting back and I'm just like, okay, let's go there. You know, I'm kind of just allowing you to go in any direction that you want. I love it. I'm really
appreciate
enjoying this.
the levity.
Okay.
I can't tell if you are or not. I'm like, should I stop? Should I keep going?
No, for real though. For real. I'm honestly genuinely enjoying this so much. I am with you on everything that you said. What does your spirituality look like now?
My personal spirituality is about really reframing my consciousness on a day-to-day basis. If you look at, affirmations or manifestation practices, while I don't necessarily agree with a lot of what those movements have to say, if you look at the essence of them, it's about the simple understanding that you are not your thoughts and your emotions and your feelings, and that you have power over them. You are the one who can impact how you react or respond to things going on in your life. If something happens to you and your default kind of like response is to like get worried and then to recoil and like go into depression, or that certainly there are like chemical imbalances at play, but if you're going to recoil on a kind of like peripheral level, you have control over your response. You have in many ways decided to allow that to be a response. Now, you could also reframe it as, look, this thing that was terrible happened to me, or something that I have to deal with. I'm going to be positive. I'm going to motivate myself to respond differently, to find the silver lining here, to reframe my future actions, right? It's about taking control of your thoughts and your emotions and then living your life in opposition in many ways to the framework that we have been indoctrinated to live our life under, to recognize that these things that people are so worried about. I mean, people are killed over land.
Yeah.
It's great. People are killed over their beliefs, which are most of the time misinformed by both the oppressor and the victim, right? Like, so, to be able to, for me, it's about really kind of like regaining autonomy of my consciousness on a day-to-day basis. And I do that through, a lot of times just taking a step back, through meditation, through breath work, through trying to gain greater perspective. And in doing so, what you'll find is that your ego loses grip. Your ego isn't able to be the only governor of your actions. If you're able to take away some of that power, or even just, first of all, the ego isn't all bad, but if it's controlling and overriding everything else, you run into problems, right? So that's kind of what my relationship with the divine looks like. I'm also very much, again, in tune with and aware of just kind of like my physical experience, like knowing that I need to rest, knowing that drinking alcohol, just indiscriminately is not good. Eating processed foods is not good. Not just because like I might gain weight, but because it's running counter to the natural ebb and flow, the natural ecosystems of my body. And
Yeah.
don't trust me. Look at the information. I mean, processed foods cause inflammation, cause heart disease. I mean, there's so many indicators. Companies, were using these because it was cheap and it was effective and they could get away with it with the FDA, but it's not good for you. So like these are all kind of like spiritual, sacred concepts that bleed into everything. And
Yeah.
you just
Even the
have to look.
science.
You just have to look at it that way. You have to reframe your thinking. So it's about reframing your consciousness for me, and welcoming in my actual reality. Like, it sounds crazy, but welcoming in the actual reality of my full existence, my wholeness. This for me is what awakening and living consciously is about. It's about reattaching to the sacred and the divine that was never lost, was just suppressed or forgotten or not even
Mm.
considered. That to me is the best way that I can kind of describe it. And again, importantly, it transcends all planes. It transcends your emotions, your thinking, your everyday interactions with yourself, with others, your job, you name it. It's all part of the equation. Because again, on a deeper level, as you noted, everything is connected. You can't
Mm-hmm.
get away from that. Everything is connected.
Yeah. Wow, yeah. Thank you so much, Aaron. This has been so much fun. I'd love
Oh,
for
I'm so
you
glad.
to get into your book, The Architecture of Awakening. I'd love to know more what we can expect from that. And I'm sure a lot of what we discussed today, you've incorporated a lot of that into your book. So let's get into that.
Yeah. So I definitely have. I think I gave away I gave away all the juicy stuff here, but I'm actually, kind of my cursory title is the architecture of awakening. I may be making a change based on my publisher's request, but we'll see what happens with that. But just
Okay.
kind of like high level, the book is about bringing first, kind of like truth and knowledge to people,
Mm,
where either they've been led to think one thing is one way or another, and kind of giving information, not dogmatically, but that allows them to shift perspective and look at things differently. Right.
mm-hmm.
That's kind of the beginning part of the book. And I talk about things like, again, this illusion of separation and how the sacred was hijacked, institutionalized. I talk about, like everyday things like consumerism, how that plays a role in objectification. And then I go into kind of like what an awakening looks like, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
why recognizing truth is so difficult when you've been living your life in an illusion.
Yeah.
And then like kind of like steps that you can take to like survive that reconciliation. And then I talk about, again, you kind of asked this before, um, about how we can collectively or individually and collectively redesign a life, based on these sacred tenets, based on our sacred connection that we've been severed from. And
Mm-hmm.
then I kind of finish it with, what for an individual, what embodying, your true nature looks like, and how you should be, or how different positive ways to kind of like live your life with this newfound, I call it like kind of power, this newfound awakening and recognition. Because in truth, this is about empowerment, and it's about
Yeah.
sovereignty, and it's about regaining autonomy, because systems thinking and putting yourself as a cog in a wheel does the exact opposite. You are giving up autonomy and sovereignty. And with a
Yeah.
perspective shift and reintegrating the sacred or the divine or the spiritual components back into your life, this is how you live in many ways, a happy and, an autonomous, sovereign life.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the book right there. And I think that I hope that it was executed well, because it's a lot, it's heavy, right, and it's a lot of information. But I think that the way I did it, I think that it gives people a nice path to digest, and then to kind of embody a lot of what I have to say.
It definitely sounds like a beautiful piece of work, Aaron. Yeah.
We'll see
That's
how it's received. I hope so. I hope it's well received.
well, I mean, whoever is meant to receive it will receive it, right? That's
Sure.
just kind of how it is, you know.
I agree
Some
with
of
you. I
us,
agree with you.
we all awaken when we're ready to, right? So, and that's just how it is. So, whoever it's meant for will find it and definitely will receive that. So, yeah,
I
I'll
agree
say
with you. I agree with you there.
just continue doing the work and just leave the rest to source, right? Into the energy,
I
the
agree. I
frequency,
agree. I agree. And
right?
I also agree that um, this is kind of to me like a big life hack. Like it's about aligning with source. If you can align with
Yeah.
like what you truly enjoy and what you truly believe and what truly inspires you, that's the secret. It's
Yeah.
not about contorting into this model of what you think is rich, what you think of like being rich or famous this is not genuine. This is a construct.
Yeah.
Go tapping into who you really are. That's aligning with source. That's really aligning with, because it's not just about like the physical things you do. It's your thoughts and your emotions are part of the universe. There's a universal consciousness. I mean, physics
Yeah.
shows that. So anyway, that to me is like it's a big part of it that
Yeah.
goes unrealized.
Yeah. Yeah. And even you saying that, a lot of what you spoke about today is such a keen reminder of how, we've had this separation between science and spirituality for such a long time, and they're so interconnected. They're like the bread and butter
I
of
mean,
everything.
look at what quantum physics is discovering right now.
Yeah.
I mean, in the quantum realm. I mean, right there, that has debunked hundreds of years of
Yeah.
science.
Yeah.
To say that consciousness precedes the physical,
Yeah.
right there, you've already shifted an entire way of looking at yourself, and to also recognize that your consciousness impacts that field,
Yeah.
right? Like that changes
Like
everything. That
like you
changes
said,
everything.
even just having a conversation with you right now, we are impacting each other. Something is shifting, whether you recognize it or not. If you say hello to someone on the elevator, right? If you smile at someone, you are shifting something without recognizing that. It's all energy, it's all frequency.
That's exactly right. That's exactly
Yeah.
right. So, I mean, yeah, just with us existing as vibrations. I mean, we are just energy.
Yeah.
But no one lives their life that way. No, everyone thinks that they're skin and bone. It's another illusion, right? So
Yeah.
people live in these illusory constructs. They have this illusory sense of everything, really, and we need to bring back reality into people's lives. It's really
Yeah.
that simple. This isn't about bringing in like hocus pocus fairy tales into your life. It's about bringing reality back into the fold. It sounds crazy, and
Literally.
people think that what we're talking about is crazy, but in truth, as I said before, it's about diluted reality versus real reality.
Real reality. Exactly.
It's really what it is. So
Yeah.
hopefully we
Thank
get
you.
there soon.
Thank you so much for this conversation. This was so much fun. Tell us where we can find you, find your work, anything that you're working on that you like to mention. Please feel free, and your socials or anything else that we need to know about you.
Yeah, so I'm not too active on social media. I find it like hard to like just kind of like I feel like it's like very, I don't know, performative. I don't do acting very well. But I have a podcast called The Evolved Podcast with Aaron Scott. It's not a host guest podcast. It's a podcast of me discussing a lot of sort of misperceived truths about things and giving a background on a lot of the systems that we live in, and a lot of the things that those systems kind of create, and giving kind of the full story or the full picture so that people gain a better perspective or a deeper understanding. So again, the Evolved Podcast with Aaron Scott. And then I have my book, The Architecture of Awakening. That title may change, but I'm expecting that to come out in a couple of months now. Just working with the publisher on finalizing stuff.
That sounds amazing. Thank you so much, Erin.
Thank you for having me, Kertia.